Hi there. Welcome to another presentation of the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Now we have Jeff Karp. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going? So good to be here.
Welcome. Dr. Jeff Karp is a distinguished chair at Brigham and Women's Hospital and professor at Harvard Medical School and MIT, and holds over 100 patents and has co-founded 13 companies. He ignites conscious living through his book, LIT, and empowers it further with his passionate mentorship. What have you been up to lately?
Well, there's a whole lot going on in my world. I just, pardon me, I just published this book, LIT, Life Ignition Tools. I don't know if you, I hid my self view, so I don't know if you can see it there, but, and I was working on it the last 7 years. Just came out in April, published by HarperCollins. And it's all about intercepting routine patterns to actively think and decide versus just jumping in with habitual responses. So really, it's like you could kind of think of it as multiple on-ramps for living a life of intentionality. And I think that in many ways, we need a lot of tools and practices and rituals more so than ever before because of how our society is operating, stimuli coming at us from every angle. We have $1 trillion is spent every year on marketing and advertising to hijack our attention every single year. So that's a massive force that we're up against. We also have this primitive wiring that, we were hunters and gatherers and nomads for tens of thousands of years, and it was all about survival. And so our brains are actually, and bodies, are wired to kind of gravitate to this low energy state, this kind of, energy saver mode, so that we can conserve our resources. And that's what makes it really difficult for us to get off the couch and exercise. And it also is the reason why our brains often get into these states where they're not working for us, maybe you drive from one location to another and you forget the route you took, or you forget where you put your keys, or, you change the password and you enter the old password, and you're like, what? And you kind of start shaming yourself. All of these things, maybe you eat a meal, you get to the end of it, and you can't remember a flavor. And I think that, you know, you combine that, this sort of low energy brain and body state that we gravitate towards, because we're kind of in this snapshot of evolution right now, right? We're continuing to evolve. And I think that will probably over time evolve new wiring, like that old wiring that doesn't serve us will start to go away. But it's still there right now. So we, you know, we have to contend with that. And then with this $1 trillion of marketing and advertising trying to hijack our attention and tell us what's important, tell us the experiences we should be having, tell us what we should be buying, telling us what we should be thinking about and how we should be behaving and acting. You know, it sort of creates this constellation of energies that is really, you know, these, you know, we need a strategy. Otherwise, we're basically going to be at the mercy of who's ever behind the algorithms. And that's what lit is all about, is being able to intercept those patterns, to develop an awareness and have tools to navigate life, to maximize our ability to have awareness and intention and deep connections with other people, and to you know, maximize our well-being and the well-being of our communities and families, and also to really maximize our ability to lead with curiosity and be creative.
Well, you know, I was a physics major at UC Berkeley, and there's a basic law of physics around vibration, and that is a strong vibration will overcome a weaker and train the weaker into the stronger, which is how we change the world. But it's also the biggest problem of what you're talking about from the beginning, and that is mass consciousness that we're completely entrained into. And then the way, like you said, the way the brain is built, it's built based on ruts. And those ruts are really hard to change. I mean, really hard. I mean, anybody, it sounds like this is the core of what you're doing, because behavioralists go, oh my God, it is so hard for us to change our behaviors because of those neural pathways get ingrained. And once they're ingrained, they're really hard to change.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nuanced, because I think that there's things that may trigger us, like, so wiring, you know, based on our experiences, things that people have said to us, negative things that people may have said to us, maybe early in elementary school, or, you know, our parents, friends, you know, whoever it may be. And so we kind of have these voices in our heads, that are not our voices. It's sort of like the voices of other people that have been imprinted, and it can be triggered in various situations. You know, even for example, like, I feel like everybody's been shamed for asking like a stupid question at some point in their life, and then they are hesitant. You know, they might be sitting in an audience and they have a question, but they're kind of debating whether it's a good question, or, you know, is this, you know, maybe I should ask it later, or maybe this is not a good one. So that fear and hesitation holds us back from like leading with curiosity and even developing and evolving, you know, our questioning ability, which I really think is a skill. And so to me, I think it's one of these things where, you know, there is that wiring that's there, and that, you know, it kind of may be there forever, but I think we can navigate it. I think we do have ways of, like, we all are born with this incredible neuroplasticity, so the ability to rewire our brains. And what we can do, and, you know, we hear of this in a lot of conversations today because I think it's just so important, but there's this realization, this awakening that, yes, we can sort of have this stimulation, but often we'll just react, but we can actually wire our brain so we pause between the stimulus and the response, and that allows us to then be more emotionally regulated and be more in you know, live more with intentionality. And the thing is, when you know, we don't hear this as much, but like from my own experiences, I know this to be true, which is like, when you build that pause between stimulus and response, it's incredibly empowering. Like, it really feels wonderful because you're actually connecting with your core values. You're connecting with your true intention. And so to me, I think like you're right that there's this wiring that it's hard to rewire some of that really ingrained wiring, but we can develop alternate wiring that allows us to then not be sort of at the mercy of that sort of negative wiring that we might have within us.
You know, when I think of this, I think and this is what I put across in my book, is the number one thing that can help from sound perspective or even music or vibration is getting people to a place of peace and stillness. Because when you're at peace, you have way more capacity to see different options for a reaction.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. And even more so, like it's like today's society puts us into fight or flight response, right? And again, it goes back to the primitive wiring. We have wiring there that is actually there to help us, right? Like it's there for survival. We're meant to go into fight or flight when we see a potential threat on the horizon, and we need to alert people around. The alarm bells got to start going because we could be in major danger. And I think that what happens in today's society is that all of these algorithms are sort of putting us into this fight or flight response, which then kind of mysteriously, it's making us like engage more in productization. It makes us want to buy things more and replace things and eat more and eat unhealthy things because our survival is being threatened, right? And so you're right. Like I feel like what we need strategies to shift from that sympathetic response where our breathing is hot, our breathing is fast, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up. We need ways to switch to the parasympathetic, which we can do, and music is a wonderful way to do it. There's other ways too, like spending time in nature, or why not spending time in nature and sort of listening to the symphony around you, right? Type of thing. So
Yeah, so many different ways actually. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this is excellent. I think it's like so important. It's so important because it's like the most difficult thing for people to do is to not be able to react. I've got a thing that I do where I lay out all the negative beliefs about how we're not good enough.
Mm.
And then what I do is we turn it around backwards, which is tricky because you can't just go, oh, I'm loving all the time. Because Spirit's like, yeah, right, give me a break, right? And then you turn it around backwards, like, oh, my core is love, right? And then we make the sound of it. Ooh, and get that truth instead of the illusion of the beliefs that we've been told that we are not good enough.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, what that makes something that jumped into my mind just when you say that is so often I'll send an email out and then I won't get a response right away. And my immediate reaction is, did I say something wrong? Does the person not like me? Is there, there's something wrong with me? That kind of a thing. And it's almost like really quick to self-shame. Now, I struggled with undiagnosed ADHD and learning differences for a large part of my sort of early education, and so I was actually shamed a lot by other people, and that also turned into a lot of self-shame. And so when I send emails out, there's a tendency to if I don't get a response within a certain time, to go to a sort of a dark negative place. But recently, what I've done,
especially if it's a girlfriend or a wife or whatnot.
right. Yeah, there definitely are different, sort of extremes of how that might, viscerally feel depending on who it is. But what I found is that there's ways to make these simple shifts that can completely flip it around on its head. And what I do is I say, okay, do I feel this way? Like, why is this happening? And I'm like, and I think about it. I'm like, well, the reason is because I care. I want to be connected to the person I'm sending this email to. Like, I want to be connected, and I care about it. And that's a value. That's something that I believe is important. Like, I want to lead with that care. Caring is an important quality for me to have. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's actually, so I'm in some ways, I'm actually able to almost do judo on it and take it from like a dark negative, sort of shame myself, to say, oh, the reason is because I actually care. And when I sort of get to that place, the negativity goes away and I'm able to move on and not worry about it.
There's also, basis of Buddhism in many things is non-attachment and no expectations. Right? I just saw a quote yesterday in this book of quotes I've got. It says, when you have no expectations, you can never have a problem with anybody's actions.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I remember reading a few years ago about, where people are like the most content or happy, fulfilled on the planet, which countries. And I think, they were saying like Denmark is one of the countries. And in the discussion, someone was saying that they believe that the reason is because people have low expectations. And so
Mm.
they tend to be happier when you don't have these expectations. And I think it's interesting to kind of think about that, like where do those expectations come from, and was it from actually the education system that is sort of ingraining in our minds, imprinting into our brains, that we need to sort of, that's a way of the way of being, that sort of cultivating this way of being
It's
of yeah.
it's really interesting because there's a definite threshold too, because we expect people to not kill us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we expect people to not be violent, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, we can't expect people to run love all the time, though.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, I think, we expect there to be trust. It's like, I was reading some of the work of Yuval Harari, who's an author based in Israel, and he wrote this book Sapiens and a bunch of other books. And he was talking about how when you get on a plane, you don't know the pilot, right? So like there's this expectation or this trust that you have, and it's sort of like if you start to look at all aspects of society, like that where you go get your coffee or you go to a restaurant, you kind of expect that you're not going to be poisoned, and the people that you're that are serving you are complete strangers. You don't know them, right? And so it's really interesting when you think about it from that perspective, like how much trust we actually, that's like a core feature of humans, is that we actually, our society is based on trust and is based on kind of, I guess, that expectation that the person that you're working with, or who's serving you, or whatever it is trustworthy. But one thing I think about a lot too is that, and it kind of it kind of shocks me when I think about it, is that how could we possibly go into a restaurant and someone serves us something that's not good for us, right? Like it's sort of like, because the trust does break down in certain settings, right? Like it's like on an airplane, sure, like they're not trying to drive the plane into a mountain. They're going to get you to your destination. We trust the pilot. We trust, that the airplane is in the right condition, and the engineers and all these things. But yet on the flip side, we go into restaurants, and often, we may have like diabetes or obesity or, whatever it is, or, cardiovascular disease. And yet we're very easily served things that will make that worse, right? And how is that possible? That, why is that acceptable in our society?
I love it. Okay, so before we dive into the techniques in detail, I got the big question,
Yes.
and that is, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet?
Wow. I mean, that's a really wonderful question, and something that I think, I think one thing that I would do actually is I would form a I would connect with a lot of different people and find, and sort of generate ideas and processes for implementing those ideas, because I think that, I don't know, I think in terms of processes, and that there's ways to bring things to people, and that there's just, but it's almost like we need to embrace diversity, every aspect of diversity, neurodiversity, diversity of countries where people, or in communities where people grew up, and diversity of just at every possible level, because there's so many nuances of bringing solutions to people. And it's often when solutions are brought to people, it's you think of one system, but you don't think of like all the other interconnected systems that are involved. And so to me, I would want to be like mapping out these things. And I mean, I think there's some maybe like more obvious problems that you'd want to try to tackle, like climate change and sustainability would be pretty high on the list, if not
Feeding people.
right at the top, right?
Yeah.
And I think, access to clean water. I think also, that there would be a lot of, to me, one of the things I feel like we need almost more than anything is to reconnecting with nature and attuning to the rhythms of life and really seeing ourselves as part of nature and in this interconnected incredible, wondrous web of life. And to me, I would probably spend a significant amount of money on finding ways and processes to help people to, reconnect to, we all, everything, including us, come from the earth, right? And so how do we sort of gain this awareness and appreciation of where we're from, and I think that's where we start being able to lead with gratitude and humility, and really respecting that every single person we meet has something to teach us in that moment, that
I
we're.
love it. I love it. The idea of the think tank is so important because, I mean, people could totally come up with ideas that they think is good for everybody, but is not until you really, really, I mean, to set up massive think tanks, I think would be really cool. And then
Yeah.
redesign the cities so that they are actually nature is throughout the city. So
Yeah.
you're not totally surrounded by noise and traffic and cement.
Yeah.
I
You
love
know
it.
what? One random thought I had the other day, like literally just a few days ago, I was reading about somebody who recently passed away, and they're a real nature lover, and a big sort of their whole ethos was about reconnecting to nature. And apparently, they had something like 500 T-shirts that had different creatures in nature on them, that like a collection, right? And I was thinking to myself, how amazing would it be if everybody on the planet wore like some sort of nature themed clothing, right? So when we see each other, it makes us think about nature and, like, the awe that we can experience in any moment if we just sort of are open up to it.
Nice. Okay. How are we going to change our patterns?
Yeah. So maybe what I'll do is I'll sort of tell a little bit of the back story to how I got to writing this book, because a little different from what I do, but actually very deeply connected. I'm a biomedical engineer at Harvard Medical School through the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I have a position at MIT and the Broad Institute, the Harvard Stem Cell Institute. And so I'm very much like sort of ingrained in the research world. And my laboratory is really focused on the process of medical problem solving. And I populate my lab of people from all over the world. We have people from 30 different disciplines and from all different fields, engineering, material scientists, science. We've had surgeons in the lab. We've had a dentist in the lab, constantly changing, and a cardiac surgeon, a gastrointestinal surgeon. Yeah, so it's constantly, and we work on all sorts of problems, but the goal is to find a way to bring those, to take those problems and then identify solutions that we can bring to patients very quickly. And so a number of technologies from my lab have gone on into clinical trials and are helping patients around the world. And one of the tools that we use is turning to nature for inspiration. So this idea of bioinspiration or biomimicry, and it's hundreds of millions of years of research and development all around us. Evolution is really the best problem solver. Evolution is a problem solving process, right? And it's sort of like, if a creature or a plant doesn't develop a solution to some sort of problem in the environment, it just becomes extinct. And so if you kind of look at it from that lens, anything that's living is here because it's overcome insurmountable challenges along the way. And we can learn from all of those solutions, and sort of any problem that we're focused on in the human realm, we can learn from from the natural world and sort of bring those solutions forward. So an agent contacted me about 7 years ago and said, "Hey, how would you like to write a book on your work in bioinspiration?" And I was immediately really excited. But I also sort of, knew that it would be best for me not to respond immediately and just say yes, that I just should think about it. And I thought I probably was going to say yes anyways, but I just spent a couple days thinking about it. And what I realized is that there's actually something like a more burning desire within to write about. And that was how, when I was younger, and I mentioned a little bit before, I struggled with undiagnosed ADHD and learning differences. And had to develop tools and strategies initially to survive. And then eventually I use those tools to thrive. And we use the tools in my lab, every day. So I said to the agent, Heather Jackson, I said, would it be okay if I wrote the book on these tools and insights that I have gained? And she was excited about it. And so that's how things kind of started off. And just to kind of go, kind of peel the onion back just a little bit more. So in the second grade, it was like a complete disaster for me. Nothing was working. My mom tried, flashcards and phonics, sounding out things. And I just was like, I felt like an alien. I wasn't getting anything. And actually the teacher wanted to hold me back to repeat the second grade. So things really were not going well for me. And my parents negotiated for me to spend the summer catching up, and then I could go on to the third grade. So all of my classmates went on vacation, and here I am in summer school. And I go in every day, and they'd ask questions and games, and they'd read passages. And on this one particular day, the tutor who I was meeting with asked me a question that changed my life. And what happened was I went in, and she read me a passage, asked me some questions. I gave answers as I did on any other day. But on this day, she looked me in the eye, she paused, and she said, after I gave my answer, she asked, "How did you think about that?" And no one had ever asked me that question before. And it was like a direct portal into thinking about thinking and, metacognition. And all of a sudden, it was like this canvas appeared in my mind. And I was like, wait, I don't have to just say what comes to my mind. I can actually pause and reflect and then think about it. And so I started to recognize all these sort of processes that I can engage for engaging in the outside world. Like I was very impulsive, OCD as well. And, I would basically just say what was ever on my mind, act however I felt in that moment. And I started to observe patterns, through the power of observation, patterns in how my brain would sort of react or just, be in different environments, what I would think about, sort of like the energy swings I'd have throughout the day, the mood swings that I would have throughout the day. I started to recognize that whenever I asked a question, I could hyper focus on the answer for a few moments afterwards. And whatever was said in that window would imprint into my mind. And then I could recall it later. I could connect it to other things that I knew. So I kind of, I would sit in class and the teacher would say, in the beginning of whatever, they were talking about, they would say something and my mind would just sort of fantasize or go into one tangent of what they said. And I missed everything else that came afterwards. And when I finally sort of zoned back in, it was too late. I couldn't follow. And that would just happen every day, every class. So questions, I realized I could actually slow the teacher down when I asked questions. And I could also start to learn by hyper focusing on the answer for a few moments, whatever I asked the question. So I realized that asking questions was my main mode of learning. And so, even in high school, and by the way, I mean, nothing ever came easy to me. I always felt like I had to work like 2 or 3 times harder than all the other kids. And so, in high school, I would spend time after class with teachers. I'd go in on weekends. Some teachers would actually meet me on weekends. I'd go in and ask questions, and then when I got to college, some classes were like 600-700 people, maybe 750 people. And I stopped going to some of them because I couldn't ask any questions. And so that's really where sort of lit for me began, was in between the second and third grade, when I was asked this question that allowed me to start thinking about thinking. And just to give you a bit of an analogy, the computer analogy, it was almost like I recognized that I had this hardware, but I didn't have software that was working for me. And I needed to program that software. That I realized in that moment that I was the coder, that I could code my brain. Like I started to realize that, I didn't know it was called neuroplasticity, but I started tapping into it. And that's how I started to develop all of these tools to essentially navigate life and survive, because I was a C&D student up until the 7th grade when my mom went up against the school board because nobody wanted to do anything. And she personally got me identified as having learning differences and ADHD.
Wow. So it's interesting that, there's one thing it brings up that, because they've created the whole curriculum for kids, right? And we've got, 2,500 exercises. We're expanding it into an
Wow.
entire curriculum, right, for kids. And the main thing that I've come across that I feel is the most important, which I think ties into this perfectly, is to be able to teach multi-sensory, multi things learning where people are learning from different perspectives at once. Basically, the whole goal is to be able to see the trees and the forest at the same time, which you went from just being tree to
Mhm.
like, okay, I can see the forest. I'm watching the trees from the whole forest perspective, right? Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
and so we do exercises where we'll do body percussion, right? And then say, okay, we're doing 5 spots on the body. Look at this flower. It's got 5 petals. Okay, let's do 8 spots on the body. Look at this flower. It's got 8 petals. Did you know that most flowers have 3, 5, and 8, which is the Fibonacci curve, which is the way God creates everything based on the golden mean, right?
Wow.
And then
Yeah,
we do like a circle of 3, 5, and 8, and
yeah.
even 10, and for the different rhythms that they play to on the body. And then we connect the 8 dot circle and the 10 dot circle with lines, and we get every sacred geometry in the universe. And then so they've been tapping on using this circle. And then we go, here's the meaning of all geometries in the universe based on 8 and 10 dot circles. And they're like,
Wow.
whoa, this is what they've been tapping on their body, right?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's like really the essence of experiential immersive learning, right? Which is almost the complete opposite of what you see in the traditional education system these days.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's really engaging the right brain. I mean, Siegel like talks about it. He says, we are killing kids by having them do homework after school where they get stressed out and then they don't sleep and then they can't think and then we give them drugs, right? It's like he says homework is a nightmare. It's the worst because we're only doing left brain and not giving space for the right brain as well.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, something also that's kind of coming up in my mind, and some relates to one of the first questions you asked about what am I up to these days. So, I've been getting involved in a nonprofit in Panama called Geoversity, Nature's University, and it's really it just blows my mind. It's just so incredible because so Nathan Gray, who is a co-founder of Oxfam America, moved to Panama maybe 23 years ago. He found this rancher land in the middle of Panama. It's like, rancher land's like the worst for the environment. And they basically cut down the trees, they burn them, and then put cattle on the what's left. And he, together with people in the rural communities as well as indigenous tribes, planted 500,000 trees and restored the rancher land to primitive jungle. And not only that, but because it's up in the mountains, the rainfall came back because the trees actually are involved in, the rain. And then the rivers started to flow more and all the biodiversity came back. And so he set up it's been this continuous, like incredible, monumentous, effort that he's, assembled these teams of people, a lot from local communities, and they basically took they didn't cut any trees down. They only took trees that had been had fallen, and they built these casitas, and they learned to grow bamboo and cure it, and then they brought in an architect from Panama who could create this incredible the Commodore where they eat, and this Taj Mahal of bamboo that they built in the middle of the jungle. And so and there's like an amphitheater where people come and play music. There's a pool that's fed by a river, so it's all natural. And it's like this campus in the middle of the jungle for people to come from all around Panama and around the world for transformational experiential, immersive experiences. And when you go, and I've been a few times, and you sort of, you go there, and you're basically deeply within this interconnected web of life, like you see, like it's hard to see it
Yeah.
when you're in the city, right? Like when you're
Oh,
right,
I
but
love this. Way I think of it is it's all music. It's music in the body and musical
mm,
flow systems and in nature. It's the
yeah.
same thing. It's like you've got the elements, which are the timbres and the relationship of the elements, but the flow system between all the ecosystem is really the whole deal. And when you really learn that from
Mm.
nature, you can actually create a business based on these flow systems where you're not just looking at the parts, you're looking at the interaction and flow of all the different people and thoughts and departments and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also where, like, this kind of systems level thinking comes in. You start to see that there's, everything you look, it's like the fractals of a of communities, right? Like that, you look at anything, and there's like like the ants are the leaf cutter ants, are walking everywhere, and they're carving these paths, and they have this whole community. They're crawling up these like branches, and so they're coming out of their nests with trash, and then they crawl up the branch and they drop the trash. So there's these little trash piles that are forming outside. Like you see like this whole like ecosystem of the ants, but then that exists within another ecosystem and another ecosystem. And it's sort of like, and they're all relying on each other. There's no waste. Everything gets regenerated. And, you see these trees that are like just waiting for another tree to fall so it can reach up towards the sun. And there's these trees called these walking trees, where the root system kind of goes out to the sides, and it's almost like a tree on stilts in a way. And what happens is that over time, one of the roots will die at the back, and a new one will form at the front. And the tree will actually move towards the light, over the course of many months or years. And so it's like it's just unbelievable to see, what's happening, and the perturbations, and then how nature responds with this dynamic equilibrium.
There's a guy that did a study and he measured all of the frequencies in the jungle, and he found that there's every frequency is there. And when a species dies that has a certain frequency, another species takes over that frequency. So you get the full spectrum of sound, which is all nutrients for every part of your body.
Wow, love to learn more about that. That's fascinating.
Okay, so
Yeah.
how do I how do I not react?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a number of things, that one can think about, for example. So I think the first is that, the fact that you're sort of asking that question and sort of thinking about it, to me, that's one of the first steps, right? Is sort of like, we get a lot of cues from our minds, from our bodies. Our bodies are very, very intelligent. We get cues from our interactions with other people. And so often, if we, are really busy and sort of deep within sort of like this, the cloud of modern life, the cues are there, but we can't, it's hard, we're not sensitized to pick up on them, right? And so until something major happens, which that's what often, something kind of, bubbles up, and then it explodes, and then, something catastrophic may happen in our life, or something very negative, or, like a relationship blows up, that kind of a thing. But I think we have to wait for that to happen. I think, part of it is creating the space so that we are open to listening and experiencing the cues that our bodies, our minds are telling us, and based on interactions with other people. So we can very much tell when we're being reactive, right? Like I feel like over time, I've been able to kind of, if I'm having an interaction with somebody and I'm like interjecting, or I'm not really listening to what they're saying, like I know it in the like, when it's happening. And so for me, it's almost like, it's sort of cultivating that bothered awareness, right? Is sort of a first step, right?
I
And
think
then,
of it as a it's often a faster rhythm, and sometimes it's a chaotic rhythm,
ooh, I like that. Yeah,
right? And you can feel it. It's like when they're going that's the vibration, versus when you're at peace, it's like, ooh.
Yeah. 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 Tuning into the rhythms. No, I like that. I'm taking notes here. Um, so, uh, yeah. So to me, and by the way, that's actually one of the ways I think, it's one of many possibilities, but like throughout the day, what I do is, sometimes I journal, but what I like to do is I like to, when I'm in conversation with somebody, I hear something, I'm like, actually, that really resonates with me. Maybe I want to come back to it later. I'll just write it down, and I'll tell the person that I'm speaking with, I'll say, hey, I'm actually going to take some notes, like I'm not, and I often do it on my phone. So I say like, I'm not texting, I'm actually taking notes, and people generally really like to be told that because it shows them that what they're saying is important, that you care about, what, so to me, that's actually part of the answer to your question is, sort of, creating the space, sort of recognizing that there's a different rhythm. Maybe it's like chaotic, or maybe it's faster, sort of tuning into that. And then I think it's then, thinking about what are the, noticing this inner desire for possibility, noticing that there's other ways of being, there's other ways of sort of creating that space in between the stimulus and the response. So for example, I'll just give one example is, let's say you're somebody like me who often will, interrupt someone when they're speaking, right? So when you sort of start to clue into that, you might just say, okay, once in my day, today I'm going to wake up and just once, something is going to come into my mind. It's going to seem like the most important thing in the moment, but I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to see what happens if I don't say it, right? And I've done this many times. And often within a moment or two, I've either forgotten what I said or I've written it down. I try to do that, just write it down and then let it subside. But I find like it's like one of these things, like it's like a thought and an emotion associated with the thought can arise very fast and then sort of subside a little bit slower, like it can kind of, but it does subside. It does leave, it sort of lessens and sort of then it fades, kind of fades away. And when you start realizing that, almost like what I like to do is think of these little boxes in my mind. I just check the box, right? Just like, wow, I didn't interrupt that person. I felt like it. I almost did, right? It was really like, it was so hard to do it. And I just give it a little check. And to me, then I've almost just done like, it's almost like a bicep curl, like I've just strengthened my ability to not react, or to at least create a little pause in between the reaction. And I think there's lots of ways that we can sort of do that, similar things throughout our day.
I love that. I love that. I think of it as going from one to two. It's like instead of just being on the roller coaster of communication or emotion or whatever, you're actually watching it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is like the witness, right? And it's like the point of awareness that's just watching what's going on. But it's really even further than that. It's really like, oh, I'm not only watching it, I'm thinking, what could I do different?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like more than one thing at a time. You're really going into multiple level consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, another thing that just sort of came to mind that I do is I recognize that, let's say I'm working on like a deadline, I'm working, I got to get it done. And then I have a meeting, right? Like, oh, the meeting's coming up at noon. It's 11:50. I have so much more to do. Blah, blah, blah. And then I go into the meeting. Often I bring negative energy into that meeting. I'm much more reactive, right? In that meeting, they might say something. I say something quick. I'm not really listening. And so what I like to do is try to build like a transition in between one thing to another. And there's a few things that I do depending on the situation and, kind of where I'm at. Sometimes I'll just say before going into the meeting, the person I'm meeting with is the most important person in their life. Right. And it just allows me to switch out of my mind and switch sort of into their mind and into that moment of connection with them. So sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do breath work in between, even just like a few minutes of breath work where, I close my eyes, and I like to do breath work where I'm really going for it. Like I'm really like diaphragmatic, really like using my muscles and almost a bit of an aggressive kind of breath work. Cause I find for me, when I do that, it allows me to settle much more quickly. It's just something that I found works well for me. So I'll do some rhythmic breathing, but I'm really bringing a lot of air in, bringing it out, and just trying to get into a really nice rhythm. And even just doing that for a few minutes, it's amazing how you can switch from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic system, and your blood pressure and your heart rate, your breathing, everything sort of comes down, and then you're like, right, and all of the emotions and whatever negativity kind of, you allow it to sort of subside or sort of fade, get diluted in the swirling of your mind.
I have a thing that I teach and do that's helpful. You could do toning, but sometimes doing vowels out loud can be like a little annoying
I
if
like
you're in
that.
public. But you can do it silently. You can just go like this,
Mm.
right? Do any vowel. I mean, if you, there's a whole thing where you can do chants and mantras or, things like that. But, just any vowel, or if you
Yeah.
could just hum to yourself. Because
Mm.
because a stable, consistent vibration is peace.
Wow. Yeah, no, I love that. Wow. I'm actually writing that down too. Because, I mean, the other thing too is that I practiced a lot of different, well, practice not the right word, but I experimented with a lot of different meditation techniques and, apps and things, and I didn't find too many things work. But then I stumbled upon transcendental meditation, where it's a single word, and the word is sort of selected for you in a ceremony, and then you start by saying it out loud, and then you just say it in your mind. And the idea is that anytime, like, when I started doing it, I would get a thought like, oh my God, I forgot to email that person. And I'd be like jumping out of the meditation to go like do the email or, whatever it is. And I'm like, wait a moment, and then, but what I noticed when I started practicing it is that, um, it was kind of like, to me, the most powerful thing, or I'd say even transformative thing about it, was noticing the thought enters my mind, and then the thought leaves my mind, and the emotion associated with the thought as well also entered my mind. And like, whoa, being pulled, I feel this gravity, and then it leaves, and sort of being like, wait a moment, that's really interesting. Because when typically I feel like when a thought with an emotion enters my mind, it's like that is my reality. Like it's almost like I can't see myself outside of that reality, right? But when you start to notice the rhythms of thoughts entering and then leaving, and entering and leaving,
Mm.
entering and leaving. In fact, I had this psychedelic experience with magic mushrooms when I was in graduate school. I think it's probably the only time that I've ever done like the hero's dose, where you take a lot. I mean, I didn't even know really what I was doing, but I was with a couple other people, and one of the profound things that happened was actually that, like, I remember I would feel like a thought coming into my mind. It was almost like a whoosh, like it was like, whoa, and it would be in my mind, and I could then feel it leaving, and I was like, oh my God, another thought's coming in, and I didn't know what it was yet. Like it was like, and then it entered, and all of a sudden it was there. And so it was almost like the thoughts coming and going were in slow motion. So when I started doing TM, this transcendental meditation, it reminded me of that experience, and that sort of consistency of experiences just really was sort of, I connected dots, and it just was like, wow, now that I recognize that I am not my thought, I am not the emotion associated with it, and that is not permanent, like, the sort of impermanence of these things, is very comforting and empowering. And that also has helped me to be less reactive about things.
I got something to share with you. You'll love this. I think there's three types of thoughts we have. First of all, there's the thoughts where we're talking to ourselves. What am I going to do today, Dave? I mean, it's like, oh, how are you going to deal with that? I was like, what's your schedule today? Okay, any long-term ideas? Okay, what's up? Right. But when we talk, we actually sing. Everybody
Mm.
sings when they talk. Some people sing really interesting songs, right? So when you're talking in your head, there's actually a song going. And
Mm.
the deal is that song flowing or not? It could be like,
Mm.
oh God, what am I going to do? I don't know what. Or the worst is the blockage. Oh God, I have no idea what to do. Ah, right? But then it might be flowing. oh, I know what I'm going to do today. It's like, maybe it's like, okay, we'll just let it flow and see what happens. Right? That's the
Yeah.
first thought, is you talking in your head. The second is a song in your head, which
Mm.
could be a mantra or a chant, but sometimes people have just songs, and that's flow. That's totally flow, right? The third is 100% present, no thoughts, present with the light around you, the sound around you, your body in the moment with zero thought.
Mm. Right. Wow. Yeah, 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 yeah. I see sometimes I just get to that place actually where I do have zero thoughts. And I'm like, wow, like that, like, it's kind of like I'm in
Right,
those
right.
moments, I'm just like, whoa, that's really, I'm like, and I'm fine. I'm okay. Yeah, yeah,
It happens when listening to sound and music as well.
yeah.
And when it really happens also is if you're on a hike on a rough trail,
Mm.
you got to be watching, present in the moment, or you're going down.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I get that. I cycle last summer, a friend of mine, Michael Gale, called me when he was on his bike and he just said, being on my bike is my happy place. And I was like, me too. But then I was like, wait, I'm not even riding my bike and I have a bike. And so I started riding last summer and I've been getting even more into it this summer. And I did like a 50-mile ride for raising money for cancer research and another 30-mile for diabetes. But I bike, around the city, and there's potholes and all kinds of things. And it kind of made me think what you just said made me think about that because and I was actually just cycling before we spoke because I have to be laser focused on what I'm doing. And so it's hard to think about anything else. And I almost feel like in some ways, maybe people, and myself included, kind of use these experiences to get away from our minds, like we actually become, like we engage in these activities where we need to hyper focus so that we're kind of getting away from our thoughts, and it's very refreshing to be there. But I also wonder, I think there's other ways to get there, but to me it's sort of interesting that just to think about what people choose to spend their time doing when they have free time, and they want to, it's often some very sort of aggressive working out or, just to kind of get into this the mindfulness kind of state, right? But
Right.
there might be other, I think there are a lot of ways to get there. There's only one of many ways to do it. But yeah, in some ways, maybe I feel like, yeah, is it like, I mean, I love getting the exercise and things, but part of it might just be like I'm trying to escape my own mind.
Yeah, it's such. We make sound tables. I get on the sound table or vibrating table every day, and I always track how long it takes me to actually stop thinking and actually listen to the music.
Mm.
And it's really interesting because if I'm really in the fire, I'm like, oh God, I can't believe what they did, can't believe what they, right? Then it may take half the song, which is a 30-minute song, right? Before I'm finally, okay, wait, let's just listen now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I find is just so powerful is, well, one is I feel like my eyes are very distracting. Like I don't know, I feel like I my eyes are what leads to like judgments and just sort of like I don't know, and maybe it's the way that sort of the screens and how there's like these algorithms to control where you look and all these things. So when I'm listening to music these days, if I'm not driving or biking, like I close my eyes, and I feel like it seems so simple, right? It's like, oh, you close your eyes, okay, now you're just listening, but like there's this profound switch that happens for me where I can now, like I was just at this conference I was mentioning over the weekend, Deepak Chopra's Sages and Scientists meeting, and there were some musicians who played, and I closed my eyes and I just started picturing like animals, like giraffes and butterflies, and I just was like, and they were kind of moving to the music, and it was this incredible. It made the experience like phenomenal. Like it was just, I felt amazing. And I just feel like when I have my eyes open and I listen to music, it's unless I'm in like an amazing, outdoor environment, where I'm sort of looking up at the stars or the forest or whatever. Otherwise, it's almost like it creates this weird contradiction, where it's like because the environments are not going along with the music.
Mhm, mhm.
There's a
Okay. Any
disconnect.
other uh, important gems from your book or your musings that you want to share?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, just sort of quickly to go over. I mean, I guess there's so many things that I could talk about to answer that question. I mean, to me, maybe just a few kind of highlights or one of the things I think is well, so questioning to me is just so powerful, right? Like I think it's the best technology that we have as humans, our ability to ask questions, because it can slow a conversation down. We can so we can actually control the cadence of our experience, right? And it can also sort of help us to unlock uh, parts of our brain, parts of conversations, can help us become more creative and innovative and lead with curiosity. And I think of it as a skill that we can get better at the more we ask questions, the more we listen to other people's questions. And there was a time in my life where I'd actually write down the questions that I heard other people asking in seminars or in social settings and just sort of looking for patterns. And it completely changed how I asked questions. So, like, to me, that's like one key tool is sort of thinking about wherever you're at in your ability to ask questions. You can always deepen that ability, and it's a skill. That look at questioning as a skill, and you can get better and better. And the best way, in my experience, is listening and writing down the questions that other people ask that you like, that really sort of, and then looking at them and looking at the patterns of the questions that you've seen other people ask. So
It's
that's
all
one big, yeah.
it's interesting because there's also, like, kind of, you mentioned briefly, the people that are receiving the questions,
Mm,
because it's actually a real skill. First of all, people sometimes get defensive when you ask a question.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes people lose their track, and other people are like, oh, cool. Now we get
Yeah.
to add and really connect more and make this more of a lively, open exploration as opposed to teaching.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, also, I kind of feel like in many ways, and it just depends on where people are at, but like I think of questions also as opening channels of communication, like sharing energy with somebody. And so, when I walk down the street, I used to think, for example, small talk, why are we doing it? Like, there's a part in my life where I was just like, why don't what, this is not a valuable thing to talk about. But then what I realized is that it actually is valuable because it's sharing energy with other people, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, like you're actually forming a connection. And it's possible to then, when you start engaging, you deepen that connection. When you start listening, you start deepening that connection. And so yeah, so questioning to me is so that's like one big tool. It's actually a chapter dedicated to it called Live for the Questions. So there are 12 tool chapters in the book, and that's one of them. Another one, which I think is just really so powerful, is there's a chapter on focusing your attention. So using your intention to focus your attention. And I think that it's like, I spoke about how questioning is one of the best technologies we have. I think another one is our ability to focus our attention. And I think that there's so many ways that and our society is hijacking our attention. So it's almost like when you start to develop an awareness of where's your attention throughout your day, you start to realize that it's being tugged on. It's your attention is being controlled in some way by external forces, this $1 trillion of marketing and advertising, and that we're not really wielding it as our own. We're letting others, sort of capture our attention and then take us to places that we might not really want to go. And so to me, I had this profound experience when I was younger where I moved out to the country in the third grade. And I was walking home. My driveway was like 1,000 feet long. There was like a creek, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night. There'd be a pack of wolves on my front lawn. That kind of. There's a sheep farm beside us, a buffalo farm across the road, farmer's field in the backyard. And I was walking home, and I saw something I never saw before, and I got closer and closer and closer, and realized it was a bat. And I'd never seen a bat before. And I was, struggling in school. So I'd get off the bus and I'd be ruminating. But when I saw the bat, all my other thoughts, all these negative thoughts immediately were squeezed out of my brain. And all I could think about was the bat. And afterwards, I started thinking, well, if that's possible, then shouldn't I be able to do that in other settings? Shouldn't I be able to focus my attention and squeeze out other thoughts? And so my whole life, I've been sort of working on developing that as a skill, being able to focus my attention. And it's helped me improve my ability to read. When I was younger, I could only read fact books and joke books. I couldn't read anything else. It's just, to me, it's like, just as an example, like if someone wants to improve their attention, and it may, sound just too simple, but like I could take this pen like there's so many things in our environment that we can use to refine our skills. Like one is I take this pen, I lift it up and I write what I just wrote with it a moment ago. We tend to just put it down, pick it up, whatever. But if I say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a moment and look at all the colors, and I'm going to look at all the design features and the shapes and the textures and the geometry. And I'm just sort of, and then it's like, wait a moment, I've just use the power of focusing my attention, right? And I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was just thinking about this pen. And if you do that sort of repetitively, make a little practice about it, like in your environment, just look around you and just notice the textures and notice the patterns and the shapes and the colors. And, then you can start to refine your ability to pick up on nuances and also focus your attention, and you can bring that to like all areas of your life.
You know, one aspect I've been thinking about a lot is listening. And it's really a cosmic thing to listen. I mean, it's really, because really, first of all, you got to squeeze out what you got to want to say, but hopefully put it in a little box so you can remember it at the end. Right? But you're also listening to the message. You're noticing the energy. You're noticing the intention behind what that person is saying. You might even notice their negative beliefs about themselves and your beliefs about them, the boxes you're putting. So when you really listen, you're doing a multi thing where you're so tuned in and getting the message, being totally present, getting the message, and often even expanding it to what the person's trying to say, as opposed to what the words they used.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like, it's one of these things that I think everybody has potential to evolve that skill, right? Like to be able to, like, I can't tell you how when I was younger, my focus attention was all over the place. And now when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I can actually listen to them. I can hear them. I can process it. And what you just said, I can do that. Like I can, that's exactly, you're sort of describing my process of sort of like I'm sort of observing what I'm saying. I'm observing what they're saying. But I'm really trying to focus on like not letting any thought in my mind sort of hijack my attention. Rather, I'm focused on what you're saying. And I think we can refine that. And so there's all these sort of on-ramps and tools in the book to kind of help people to develop that skill.
One thing that's really kind of shocking is when you do a Zoom call and then you listen back, and how much more you hear than when you're thinking about what you're going to say.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true.
Okay. What else?
So another big one for me has been, and we spoke a little bit about this, but press pause, right? And so one of the things I noticed, for example, is like I could sort of construct my days to have back-to-back meetings, right? So there's like, and then I get to the end of the day and I'm exhausted, but I'm like, wow, I really got a lot accomplished. I was really productive. But then I started to realize that there was something like that wasn't really jiving, that there was something like I wasn't, it was almost like I realized that I was missing out on something intentional in what I was doing. And so what I did is I started experimenting with pressing pause in between meetings. And I would take 5 or 10 minutes to literally do nothing, not email or text or social media. I would just sit there, close my eyes, or I would just sort of go for a walk outside and let my mind swirl around. And what I realized through doing that is that we need time to process information and experiences, that our brain needs time to sync up. Like we have a lot that goes into our subconscious mind, and we kind of need to, let things swirl around for connections to be made. And often what I'll find is that the person that I just met with, they said some things, and then I'll be like, wait a moment, someone I met like 2 months ago said something very relevant to that. And then I'll be like, wait, we should all get together because, right, like get each other in the room and share energy and let's move this thing forward. But I wouldn't have drawn those connections. I wouldn't have done that lateral thinking had I not pressed pause to let my brain sync up.
Oh my God. I think that's one of the most important things you said. I mean, it's so important because, what I tell people also is if you can go to a place of peace multiple times through the day, and we're talking 1 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? If you can do that, then people say, oh, I can't sleep at night. Well, the reason you can't sleep at night is because you've been buzzing all day. You need to stop over and over. And that's so great. Then be able to let things sink in and process. Oh my, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, some of the rituals and practices kind of that I do just more recently. So, and some of these things are not in the book, but one thing that I do is, for example, like, and I'll just give you kind of a live stream, right? Because again, like I've been shamed a lot. I've done a lot of self-shame. So like when you say, oh, this is the most important thing that you said, my mind goes to, wait, the other stuff I said is not important. That's what my mind is thinking. And just to let you know, right, that's what my mind goes to, right? And so what I do is, right, in those moments, right, because I'm like, nah, Jeff, what are you doing? I'm like, I think of a creature in nature, and I think of that creature is under threat, right? Like, so for example, there's tons of creatures right now on the planet that are about to be eaten, right? I mean, it's just the reality of nature. And so I think of, for example, an octopus, and there's a seal that's coming to eat it. And I sort of think, and I just really visualize it. And what that allows me to do is, again, it provides this sort of interception. It intercepts this pattern in my mind and allows the thought to subside, and then I can move on, right? So it's actually a tool that I use a lot. And sort of like when I'm ruminating or my mind goes somewhere negative, I just think of a creature in nature, that's about to get eaten. And that that allows me to just, kind of create the space between stimulus and response, right? The other thing that I do is, before you mentioned kind of going to bed, one of the things I do is, like, I notice when my head hits the pillow, it's like all these things that I didn't do, or that I didn't feel I did well, or that I'm worried about, or deadlines, that's when I start thinking about it. So recently what I've been doing is I visualize that I'm a miniature version of myself standing on the back of creatures in nature. And I visualize the experience that I'd be having. So I could be a giraffe, could be a mouse, it could be a seal or a whale or a dolphin or, a bee or, just a bird or a butterfly. And I just visualize, okay, what would be the texture of what I would be standing on, and like what would be around me. And like, if I'm like a mouse, like where's it going? And, like, am I ducking down so I can get under things? And, like that kind of a thing, right? Or like if I'm on a bee, am I feeling the vibration of the flapping wings and and I fall asleep so much quicker than I ever used to, just by doing these visualizations.
One thing that's really helped me is tuning into multiple things at once. So I'll tune into all 7 chakras simultaneously. And then my brain is like, okay, there's got a lot, it's got a lot to take care of, a lot of to think about, and there is no room for any of the thoughts.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And the thing is that I just think is so incredible is when you start experiencing just like one of those things, or even a little bit, you take a tiny step forward, it's like you unlock these limitless possibilities. Like we've just discussed, like just a tiny number, but there's like infinite possibilities of things that you can try to create more space so that you're not reactive, to focus your brain, to ask more higher value questions, to, pause and let your brain sync up, to fall asleep, get better quality sleep, and to deepen your connections with other people, and to, live your life with more creativity and more connection. And like, there's just so many possibilities that are right there. And it's sort of like you just need to kind of find those just tiny little steps to take, and just creates like a domino effect in your life.
I love it. What's the name of your book again?
So the book is Lit Life Ignition Tools. Use nature's playbook to energize your brain, spark ideas, and ignite action.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So anything else before we do some music on the way out?
Yeah, no. This has been a wonderful conversation. I love it. I know I originally was thinking like presentation, and then I was like, you know what? Let's just have a discussion. I'm so glad that we did, because yeah, this has been, really great. And I look forward to watching it, because I'm going to be taking more notes. I feel like you said so many things that I need to get, I need to take more notes for. But yeah, I'm really excited also for the people in the audience to experience Rashab, who I met over the weekend. He's just an incredible sitar player, and not just player, but he is committed to using his music for healing. And so when I, you invited me, and then when I sort of interacted with him, and again, he's one of the people who played, and I closed my eyes, and and these animals just kind of popped into my mind, and I was just, wow, it was just such a profound experience. And I feel like his kind of ethos and what he's trying to do and what he's bringing to the world, it just synchronous with what you speak about, and in your mission and your vision, and what you're doing.
Cool. Well, thank you for your work and everything. This is it really, yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's just really flowed really, really well.
Yeah. No, this is wonderful. So, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Nice. Okay, so we'll end with this recording. Take care.
Okay. Bye bye.